Hello, and welcome to Sacred Scars, Stories of Religious Trauma and Healing, where we explore the journey of healing from religious trauma. Today's episode may touch on sensitive topics. If you find it challenging, please practice self-care, take breaks, talk to someone you trust, or consider seeking professional support, such as therapy and/or spiritual correction. Let's dive into this week's episode on religious trauma, Catholicism, healing, and discernment with Shannon Marks, whom I'll have introduce themselves.
My name is Shannon Marks. I have my master's in education. I taught religious studies at the high school level for about 3 years. I have my own personal experiences with religion as well. And I love to discuss religion with others because I think we all have, no matter our experiences, a mixture of good experiences and bad experiences with religion. And I think that compartmentalizing those and looking at those in a healthy way, where you have space to do that, it's just really healthy for people to grow as people bigger, honestly, than just their religious beliefs. I think that people are so multifaceted that really we need to look at our religious experiences, whether we enjoy them or not, and really grow from those, and become bigger than what our basic belief system is. So yeah, that was a lot of what I taught in high school. I taught for the freshmen ancient Hebrew scriptures and an intro to faith in general. So the curriculum was Hebrew scriptures, but I loved to add in this exploratory first year experience. And then I taught seniors. I taught them world religions and social justice, or what the curriculum is Catholic social teaching, but I definitely did my own spin on that. So yeah, that was kind of my experience as a teacher. And of course, I have my own experiences as someone who has had a Catholic education since first grade all the way up through grad school. So essentially, there never was a time in my life where I didn't exist in a Catholic educational space. Yeah.
Love that. I love the fact that you also involved like your own spin on the social teaching aspect, as a lot of people may not know. Catholicism has a really beautiful social teaching in terms of social
Mhm.
justice.
Yes, that is one of the things that I think I do provide Catholicism with a huge thumbs up, is that they're very consistent in what they are saying. No matter how you stand on like abortion issues or bodily autonomy, their pro-life transcends, the womb. And so I do give them that thumbs up, is that, at least they're consistent. They're not as much pro-birth as they are really focusing on the whole person. So I do give them that uh, 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 leeway when I do teach, because I think that they do follow their teachings to a T as best they can. And I can kind of go over in my experiences where I've seen negative enforcement of those rules and stipulations, and then positive enforcement of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what brings you into having these discussions with about like religious trauma, Catholicism, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of podcasts talking about the diversity of experiences as well, and then focusing on healing in a lot of either atheist circles or ex-Catholic circles, any sort of anti-theist circles. There's a lot of fixation on the negative, instead of having a conversation, because a lot of people, regardless of their experiences, even if we could categorize this as 100% negative, they do find positives within their religion, whether that be ritual or community, or just finding peace of mind throughout the week, having a space for yourself, maybe. And it also is directly connected to our childhood. So there's positives to our experiences, even if we are saying, you know what, this religion isn't for me anymore. So I think that having a great dialogue is part of the healing process. I didn't start my religious healing process and actually start to think about things until I started studying religion. A lot of my experiences went unreviewed and not really analyzed in a way that I needed to. So going into religious studies in my undergrad and then bringing what I had discovered to the classroom and saying, yes, the curriculum is stating this thing, that you're supposed to follow this. In my classroom, that was not the space. And that was my experience in high school as well. Was it really was not pushed. There are definitely teachers across the country that do push theology. For me, it was more so, let's learn about this belief system, whether or not you believe in that. And I think that made a far softer class, but it also allowed students to sit with their own experiences and say, do I actually believe this? Is this culturally what I believe? Is this spiritually what I believe? Is this more a soothe for me, or does this bring anxiety, or both? And in my personal experience, I've met students, I've met adults with deep salvation anxiety and all of these things that, even though they're enjoying the religion, it is bringing this secondary effect that is greatly changing their lives. They're avoiding relationships. They are struggling to interact with people of different faiths. And even if they are following their rules to a T, it's this ingrained anxiety that they have. So, my goal personally and in my studies is just to help liberate people from the toxicity that can come with religion, because it doesn't matter if your experiences are 100% positive or 100% negative. There's a diversity there. And so that's just essentially what I really love about religion, is that you can form a lot of bridges and you can do a lot of healing. But there's this other side to that double-edged sword of, this can be utilized incorrectly, which we see in history, and even today. But you can also, there's so much power that people get from it. And us being humans, it's such a wild experience to see what good comes from things and what bad comes from things. And religion is kind of my specialty for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of taking like liberative approaches and
Yeah, definitely. And looking at the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, their curriculum, looking at that and seeing just how negatively things are phrased, I wanted to go into teaching and education in order to spin that, in order to find the good in what could be a very negative experience for a student. Not all students that come in, even if their family is Catholic, they may not subscribe to that, and they may feel a deep pain and a deep sense of wanting to belong, especially my queer students, that it really wasn't provided to them by the church. And so when we look at the curriculum and there's just this barrier to entry, or this barrier to being yourself, and this deeply ingrained elitism, I wanted to pull from that, because in the curriculum, the high school curriculum from the USCCB, they have challenges to every course. So it's essentially questions that you may hear as a religion teacher as like a combat against your proselytizing. And I thought these were funny because they're questions that I genuinely will ask students and will bring up, because they are really important questions to ask yourself. One of those questions is it one faith or religion just as good as any other? If you're being a good person, why does it matter what deity you are devoting yourself to? And the response in the curriculum is no. The fullness of revelation and truth subsists in the Catholic Church. And it's like, okay, but when you're dealing with a diversity of students, when you're dealing with a diversity of experiences, if you're telling children that during their most formidable years, mind you, that they're lacking without religion innately, that's insane to me. And so a lot of my reflection was just challenging students to say, you know, it's okay to think critically about this religion. Studying religion doesn't mean studying how to practice that religion and be the best Catholic or the best Christian or to become Christian. It's about studying the religion as a whole and seeing what it can do for people and actually what it can't. Because a lot of the students would, it was either 0 or 100. They were very much atheist. I want nothing to do with this class. I hate it here. Or they are so involved in their faith that there's no room for anything else. They're not developing as a person. So definitely, I really enjoyed when I did teach at the high school level. I really enjoyed providing that space because there's a lot of personal growth that happens in a religion class that I think from the outside, people think this is proselytizing. It definitely happens in a lot of schools. And I hope that other teachers are using my methods. I've met other teachers that do subscribe to the same sort of teaching philosophy. But there are other teachers that say, no, it's your job to convert. And I used to tell the students, and I heard this from my religion teacher, I don't get a toaster every time I convert another Catholic from the Vatican. I don't win a prize. I'm not on commission, essentially. And that's how studying religion should be. It should be more calm, more, at your own pace, because there's a lot of unpacking to do personally within yourself before actually being able to look at something with clear mind and clear eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. So trying to find like a middle ground and
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where the most healing happens. I mean, when I studied religion, you come at it sometimes when you have trauma, in my experience, you come at it as this atheist and you're very ingrained in this atheism, almost bordering on anti-theism. You think all religion just stinks, it's horrible, right? But simultaneously, you're angry at a God that you don't believe in, right? You're upset, you're lashing out, you think, how could God do this to me? But simultaneously, you're saying that you don't believe in that God. And both of those feelings are very valid, but it also is a sign of this unprocessed grief. This how could this have been done to me by this being? I'm so mad that I just hope you don't exist. And that's such a roundabout way of kind of squashing down these this mourning of either your childhood or these negative experiences that you've had, these traumatic experiences. And to make it worse, it doesn't even have to be a traumatic experience within the church. It can be that you grew up impoverished and you are feeling like, how could God leave my family like this if he loves us so much? And a lot of our understanding and my education in my undergraduate degree centered around why do bad things happen to innocent people. And I would always pose this to the students as well, because I think it's a question that I think a lot of Christians avoid, or they find an easy answer. When I would pose it to students, I would say, yes, God is all powerful, all knowing, and all loving. We have this three-legged table. A lot of, if you find online r/atheist Reddit circles will use this as an attack, but it's a genuine question. If all of these things are true, then why do bad things happen to good people? And that answer that you find typically, or multiple types of answers, are all very shallow. It shows a lack of truly questioning. And that's why I would provide it to the students. Is a big answer is God is challenging you. He's making you stronger. My response to that is, my older brother was born with cerebral palsy, and he cannot walk or talk. My mother has grown from that. That's true. However, is my mother's development and her character and her strength, is that worth the taking the ability to walk from another person? And I'd argue that's not accurate. That's a roundabout way of avoiding the harshness of the conversation. To say that this all-loving being is challenging you by taking something and by harming others or yourself, that doesn't strike me as all-loving. And it doesn't strike me as all-powerful either, because if there's a better way to do this, challenging of oneself, an all-powerful being would have that. And then the other response is that we are sinful creatures, or that you were sinful. And to this, I always bring up the book of Job, is that this follower of God, this perfect follower of God, he has everything taken from him for no reason at all. We never get a reason in the book of Job. It's a beautiful poetic book, and it directly goes against this answer, because the answer that Job's friends provide is, you must have been sinful. You must have done something wrong. And in the epilogue, which I think a lot of people avoid, God presents himself to Job's friends and says, actually, you were more sinful than Job, because you're inventing reasons for why these things happen. And in my undergraduate thesis, I wrote a lot about this desire to intellectualize our experiences in a religious sense. So is God punishing someone with cancer? Is God testing someone with cancer? Why do we need to have that rationale in there? Why are we intellectualizing it? Because this leads to a lot of trauma within the church, especially when we go with the first response of God is punishing you, that you're being sinful, and therefore this is why this wild, almost seems like coincidental bad thing is happening to you. And so that was a lot of my unpacking personally, was, man, there's a lot of really bad things happening in my life. I'm not experiencing a lot of great stuff in my childhood. So when I compare this to everyone else's experiences, why is this happening? And when you don't have a good faith background, when you don't have a background that's ready to support you as a person, when they're focusing more on the religion than you, you're going to get those answers. God is challenging you. You must have done something bad. And it just doesn't strike me as a method to help students, a method to help children grow as people. You're almost being confined then by religion, because anything at that point that happens to you, whether good or bad, is a product of your religion instead of a product of you. You graduate from grad school, and yes, you can be thankful for the ability to think, the ability to learn, the privilege that you have in that. But if everything is devoted to God, then how are you to be your own individual as well? So it's definitely a topic that I love discussing. And that's why I'm so thankful for the podcast, is because a lot of people have it comes out net neutral. They have good experiences within their church. They have bad experiences within their faith. And, coming to terms with that doesn't have to be a judgment. It can be a healing process. It can be stepping aside, looking at this thing from all angles, and really analyzing how you feel about this thing. And then with that, you have the power to either take a step back from that religion or re-enter. And it's the re-entering that's, I find, the most difficult for people, because once you've stepped out of a religion, there's guilt there too. Is that, why did you give up on it? And really, that's a part of your life journey. It's a part of who you are as a person, is that you needed to take a break, you needed to take a step back, and that's okay. Not feeling guilty, that's part of that toxicity that I try to avoid with the students, is saying, you are valued at any point, and you should feel your value at all times, as a person. And if there's anything that's keeping you from that, you need to look at that with harsh eyes and say, why don't they value me? Why don't I value myself? These are really big questions that, I think in therapy, oftentimes it's either you doing religious counseling to make sure that you can heal and be part of that religion, or it's avoiding religion altogether, keeping it very secular, focusing on psychology, which is fantastic, but sometimes that can avoid root causes and not give you any sort of stability or any sort of higher power that you may find to be helpful. But if there's avoidance there, you're going to have this lack of foundation. There's going to be a brick missing in your foundation, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am actually a therapist in terms of like employment, and I do see a lot where people are uncomfortable talking about religion and spirituality,
Mhm.
even though spirituality is actually a significant chunk of a person's well-being. It's part of the self-actualization kind of aspect and belonging and stuff like that. If you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because typically I was bringing up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but spirituality can bring in some of the senses of belonging, self-actualization, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So when you're missing that, you are missing a brick, like you said. And without that, it is hard to feel like fully yourself sometimes without being able to have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that is so difficult to broach, because, um, like I had said, sometimes people say, I'm just going to leave this faith and then I'll be okay. But if the pain is in that faith, you need to look back at it. It's hard to look, but it will come with healing. And for me, having negative experiences with church itself, not really Catholicism, but church itself, saying, don't want to be here, whether that be for selfish reasons, like, I don't want to spend my time here. I don't care about any people here. Or whether it's genuine, where I've had, negative experiences where in my elementary school, there was a huge classist, elitist sense there, where divorced families, families who used even in vitro fertilization, they're second class folks. They're no value to the church, whereas wealthier families are. They're able to donate, they're able to contribute, and therefore they're just better, right, in the experience. And so you feel low value. And then, so having this negative experience, it wasn't until I didn't go back to church from after high school. I didn't go back to any mass. And then when I started my religious studies courses, one of the courses was on sacred space. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back and I want to look at this almost in an ethnographic, anthropological sense. I want to just observe. I want to not put any of myself into it, because I'm just studying it. This isn't for me. I'm just studying it. And what I found was, in going back, I had such an emotional reaction to not only the changes, because they changed the responses in that time. So when I went to, when I was in elementary school, it was, and also with you, and then they changed it to, and also with your spirit. And such a simple change, like, created this otherness that led me to do a lot of studying, a lot of thinking into how do you re-enter a faith after having a negative experience? And also, how do you heal? And a part of me thought, I can just go back and I can just think again, redo everything, but you're caught with that negative childhood upbringing or negative experiences from your life. And you have to really look at them and really adjust to how you see things and your ability to look at that trauma is so important because for the rest of my life, I could have just said, no, I don't want to go back to Mass. I don't like it here. It's not my vibe. But what's beneath that? And had I not been studying religious studies, I wouldn't have had the space to look at that. But I really do encourage others who have had negative experiences. If you just called it quits, essentially quit cold turkey, um, really finding a space and finding a baseline in your life and a time to look back. Not in a sense of like go rejoin the church for sure, but in a sense of how did this create the person that I am, and what treatment and what experiences can I review and can I understand in order to say to myself, I didn't deserve that treatment, or that philosophy doesn't make sense and I don't subscribe to that. Because a lot of people, even if you say, I don't like this church, I don't like this religion, that philosophy is still ingrained. Even if you leave, there's damage there. I've met folks who have left the Catholic Church, but they still deal with guilt. They still deal with that guilting that they were raised with. They still deal with even salvation anxiety. They don't believe in God, but they're still nervous about going to hell. And it's like, okay, you haven't healed. And I don't know whether you're at a good place to look back at that right now, but at some point, like that should be a personal mental goal for you to be able to look back and say, that wasn't a good time in my life, and I'm moving forward. Whether or not you need some form of scaffolding, some form of support, whether that be a group or whether that be discussing with others or listening to podcasts, even finding that space is so crucial, because otherwise you're just going to be caught with it off guard, like I was, like crying in a mass that I was supposed to be experiencing for an essay. And I ended up asking my professor, can I just adjust this essay to be like an analysis of like my like just insane emotional response to the othering and the openness of the space, because I was just there essentially alone. The mass was very bare. It was a weekday, random weekday. And it just felt so oppressive, but in a sense that I couldn't target anything. I couldn't say, "Oh, this priest, he stinks," or this space is ugly. I don't like it. It really was I don't know, like almost like you're a caged animal. You don't know where to attack. You don't know what you're really upset by, and you're just kind of trapped. You feel like suffocated. Um, so a lot of like I said, a lot of my own healing came from really studying it, understanding it, being able to compartmentalize, being able to look at it um, with a clear headspace, in a space that was healthy, and that I felt safe, whether that was therapy later, whether that was discussing it with friends who I knew I could trust, or whether that was studying it in a class and being able to critique thought processes and these answers that make no sense when you really think about them, to really difficult questions that I would ask the students and I would ask myself. Yeah.
I feel like that discernment aspect is so important to explore like some of those roots of those thinkings, philosophies, theologies, and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I used to tell the students there's more ways to be Catholic than there are Catholics. I think that that's valuable because they may love just the aspect of reading the Bible, but they hate Mass. That's okay. Breathing into that, saying there's no guilt that you should feel from that, because a lot of Catholic education, it's hard lines. It's yes or no. It's like I said, it's if somebody's a different faith, is that okay? No, like that is such a harshness and such a binary way to exist, that it didn't leave a lot of space for my students who are unique human beings. They're having their unique experiences, and having a space to journal, to reflect, to think about why they feel the way they do, was really important. And I think that it allowed them to go into, to continue in this Catholic space because they were freshmen going into their high school career, or if they're seniors going into college, and some went into trade schools and different things like that, but they're entering the adult world. You need to be able to, when you're feeling a feeling, to hold on to it, to name it, to really understand why you're feeling that. Because alternatively, you're going to feel things whether you're in the religion or not, and you're not going to have a space to process, and it's just going to be bottled up. It's going to come out in different ways. It's going to be pressuring your partner maybe to join that religion when they don't want to, or vice versa. Maybe you go into a relationship that is uh, 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 different, multi-religion, or you practice differently. You're not going to have the words or the ability to really describe what you're going through. You're just going to feel pressure. And having the ability to say to yourself, this is what I believe it confidently. I should not have to persuade others to believe in the way I believe, or live in the way that I live. I think that's a huge issue within Catholic education, especially given the curriculum, and saying other religions are they're fine. There's a general respect, but there's still this concept of falsehood. In the challenges section, it says Catholics are to be respectful of people in their intrinsic dignity, but not tolerant of falsehood. And I think that that's just such a hard line to draw, and say, you should respect people because they are in fact alive. Okay. But every other aspect of them religiously is incorrect. It's a wrongness. That's not a good situation for anyone to be in, whether they're on the giving end of that treatment or the receiving, because they are closing themselves off to other people. It's not good for the workplace, not good for diversity, but they're also really shutting off their ability to think critically about themselves and about the world. They're just saying that this is the way to be, and everything else is not truth, with a capital T. And when you define others as truth or not truth, you're setting yourself up for really a really bigoted population, a population that does not care for any sort of marginalized community, because truth can be altered. Some churches, they say the only folks who are doing well theologically are folks who are wealthy, because obviously God is blessing them. How do we combat that? I have no clue. Some of my religious friends will just say, I'll go to a different church. But the people who are continuing there, how do they feel when, they've been dealt a bad hand all of a sudden, and now God is a enemy, and they're left with essentially nothing to ground themselves theologically, and religiously in their life. So yeah, I mean, I had such a unique experience in my elementary school, where my elementary school is saying, God doesn't really care about you, or he is punishing you or testing you because of all of these negative experiences. And then in high school, I have an aggressive shift towards your instructors being they were almost like parental figures to us. It was very interesting. Everyone in my class, my small class of 36, which is tiny compared to some larger public high schools, but the 36 of us all had some form of like family or personal issues that we were dealing with. And so we kind of bonded through that, and the staff members were aware. And so they acted as stand-in parents almost. They would, my English teacher taught me how to throw a football. My history teacher would give hungry students, especially food insecure students, he would just have snacks and check in with us. So there's this aggressive shift in me understanding, and not everyone has this experience, but me understanding that it's the uniqueness of a person, not their religion, that is determining their treatment of others and of me. And I wanted to be a part of that. That's why I went into teaching. That's why I love speaking with others, whether they're like youth or not. I think everyone's on their own journey. And I think that religious healing is so important to moving on to your next steps in healing. Because if you're working on getting a job, being financially stable, being chemically stable, maybe with medication, getting diagnosed, all of these things. Like you're saying with Maslow, you're building on something that maybe you haven't dealt with the bare minimum. You're financially stable, you could have a roof over your head, you're chemically good. Maybe you even have friends, but that spiritual component is going to stay like a hole. And I think everything starts to get sucked into this. But what is the meaning of life, especially as you age, as you go into your, midlife crisis era, your 40s? You're going to hit this wall of, well, I actually don't know where I go after I die. I actually don't know how to deal with my friend who's getting married in a church. I feel a deep discomfort in these situations. Um, and I think starting early, giving children a space to understand religion as a whole is really important. Catholic schools have the opportunity to do this because they have freedom to teach religion. Public schools, they don't have that opportunity. They don't really have a space to teach about religion in the same sense as, we're studying our own personal spiritual growth. And there's a lot of Catholic high schools that don't do well. People have really negative experiences. My high school experience was very positive. Um, but I would hope in the near future that we can look at Catholic theological curriculum and really revamp and redo and understand that there's a true diversity in our population, and the bare minimum is understanding how others function differently than you. I don't know when that would be coming. I don't know if that's even anything that's on their radar, but that's what I wrote about in my master's thesis, was essentially teaching soft skills, but also a lot of my literature review was focusing on what the Catholic Church has the opportunity to do versus the outcome, what they actually do. Is there value to a religious studies class? If you live in a good school district that has great funding from property taxes, how do you balance that? Your student could, in theory, take more AP courses, elective courses, if they went to a good public school. Not everyone has that opportunity, of course. But then we look at the Catholic school system and we say, well, the outcomes statistically are better. The correlation is wealth, but how do we look at the positives here and form an educational environment that is actually worth being in? and how is it an educational environment that's going to promote the next generation being especially more diverse, but being just more able to understand themselves. Because we do have a bit of an identity crisis with Gen Z. I'm hoping to study more of that soon and kind of go into my my PhD, my Doctor of Education, actually, to go into how to adjust educational institutions to fit the needs of Gen Z and especially Gen Alpha, which we don't have a lot of data on yet, but being ahead of the curve there, because education really is the first outside of the home support system that students and children encounter. And it is the home of a lot of trauma. And so adjusting for that is crucial, because I don't think that we're really dealing with religion in a way that's well thought out, because we're dealing with it either in a binary way. You're either secular, in a very secular institution, or you're proselytizing. And there's no room for this growth, this middle ground of how do I just explore it as a whole? How do I explore it in its entirety? No matter what the religious experience is, I think people should know basic information about diverse religions, but also about themselves. The ability to say, I am Catholic and I like these components of the religion. Um, I am not a fan of these components of the religion, and I'm okay with that. That doesn't make me any less than. And having that confidence, that space to analyze what you enjoy and what you don't, um, is crucial to people avoiding religious trauma, being able to notice those red flags when they go into a new church and they say, "Oop, I don't like that. I don't like that, and I'm no lesser when I take a step back from this church and choose somewhere else." So it's definitely something that needs to be in the childhood space. There's arguments for where that should be taught, whether it's at the home, whether it's in the school, but it is so crucial to your growth. And I know a lot of folks in their adulthood who they have to backtrack. They're very successful, but they have to look back. They have to go back to when they were so young and really take a hard look at their experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it should be taught like in the era of like learning about consent, because consent is more than
Mhm.
activities. It's like consenting to a hug, consenting to a conversation, stuff like that. And I feel like youth should be taught on whether or not they're going to consent, on the things that they're going to be taught, the things that they're going to be um experiencing in a spiritual space, in a spiritual setting, especially like children and stuff like that. They should have that ability to explore their religious identities as well as their gender or sexual orientations.
Yeah, I think consent is such an interesting topic too, because there's this higher power consenting almost for you, and then there's your parents consenting for you by choosing the school that you go to. And there's a lot of lost consent when we look at especially Catholic education, but education as a whole. You have to be there. It's built essentially um, like babysitting. I mean, that's the education system is run from, 8 to 3, or, even 7 to 4 if they have extended hours, so that folks can go to work. But what they're experiencing in a huge majority of their day is out of their control. Even traditionalist teaching styles, they have methods of forcing that control, raising your hand, standing for the pledge, all of these things that are pretty normal. We don't see them as out of place here, but it is a taking of consent. It is um, uh, an adjustment for young folks to understand that the world that they are entering and that they will enter as adults is that there's things you may or may not want to do. But when religion is put into that, when you're forced to stand for prayer, when you're forced to pray, how do we combat that? How do we deal with that as educators, also therapists? How do we deal with this ingrained sense of I can't choose how I'm doing things, to the point where even when you take a step back or when you go to practice another religion, maybe in the future, there was a huge gap between me saying, I can no longer pray to this Catholic God that I grew up with. But if I wanted to follow a neo pagan faith and I sit down and want to pray to that, how do I do that? Because it's such familiarity to this prior loss of consent in elementary school, where you have to pray, you have to do the rosary, you have to go to mass, you have to go do the uh, you have to go do reconciliation, and you're forced to discuss your sins. It's very freeing, but you also don't really know what to do with that freedom. You kind of you either quit religion altogether, which can be difficult if you're missing that, or when you encounter a religion that you really appreciate, you kind of fall back into this, well, I have to do it this way. And that is such a important thing to have a space for in Catholic education. In my classroom, it was, we're learning this religion because it's one of the many religions that you may encounter in the world. You're not learning this religion because I want you to practice this religion. Now, I can't speak for the other classes, other teachers, once they move on from freshman year, but at least they have the ability to say, I agree with this and I don't agree with this. And I want to do this ritual, or no, I don't want to do this ritual. I can step back. I can even study it. I can even have an interest in it, but I don't have to do that. That was so important for me to provide to my students in those spaces. Because for me, it wasn't a choice. You stood up for prayer. You did the rosary. You went to mass on Wednesdays. You even had to wear different clothing for mass. You had to do the different uniform, the better uniform with the penny loafers and the sweater vest or whatnot. It dictates every kind of component of your life. Whether or not you can even speak at church, you can't. It's kind of forced. So finding the ability to choose and consent to the way that you practice as an adult then is really difficult, especially if you're going back to the church. If you say, I want to give this another shot now that I'm an adult, now that I have my autonomy, now that I feel like I've grown as a person, I've individuated all of these things, it may still feel, you may feel that ickiness, that, oh, that fear, am I being forced to do this? How do I act? Do I kneel now? Do I stand now? What are the words? And that's a lot of what I experienced when I went back to mass, is like, how do I even exist in this space? What am I supposed to do? And that is so spiritually binding. You're almost like in handcuffs at that point, because you just can't freely decide for yourself. You're looking for the rules and you're looking for what you're supposed to do in order to be good, to have this moral goodness. But that's something we need to take a step back from. You're always morally good. You follow laws, right? But innately, if you talk during mass, if you send a text during your sermon, if you have to step out, and this can be any religious circle, if you step out of Friday prayers at mosque, if you break the circle, if you're a neo-pagan, if you break your ritual circle, that's not an innate badness within you. That's a humanness, and that's a very unique experience that I think we really fixate on. We really say, "Oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that," or that prayer is less meaningful because I had to take a call. Um, all of these things, or I got distracted, or I didn't really do the full prayer, I just did half of it. All of these internal judgments when we should be understanding ourselves and really taking a breather, going easy on ourselves. I think we're really harsh. There's a harshness because of that anxiety, because of that. If I don't do things perfectly, there's going to be punishment either in this life or the next. So it really is an important topic to discuss with others, an important topic to bring up at therapy. Even if you're not currently practicing a religion, I think spirituality is something that should be central because um, our worldview and our personal philosophies are crucial to our healing. If you don't believe in your goodness, your ability to go to therapy and heal from other things or understand yourself or to process is going to be affected because you don't believe you're a good person because you're bad. You didn't do everything correctly, or you no longer go to church, or you no longer do your prayers or your rosary. So it's so crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I left the Catholic Church many years ago. I grew up in a very conservative Catholic upbringing.
Mhm.
But I've heard there's been a lot more changes in the conversation of Catholicism in some areas of Catholicism. It's not like all of Catholicism is doing a lot of this discernment and questioning like you're mentioning, but
Mhm.
I've heard there are hubs of people who are starting those conversations.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, every diocese is unique. Every religious practice. I mean, I went to Regis University, which is a Jesuit institution, and the Jesuits are so vastly different from the Dominican friars of my grad school, Providence College. They have a very unique view on how to behave and how to look at things theologically and how serious you're supposed to be about these things, and they hold themselves differently. And experiencing that shift from my undergraduate religious studies degree, where the Catholic Jesuit high school I went to, Regis University had drag shows, and I performed in them. So it's like that seriousness, it's and that ability to flow with the times. The Jesuits have a huge advantage because they are a lot softer on themselves. Um, that is seen as a negative from other religious groups. So the Dominicans don't really get along with the Jesuits. They're stern, they are firm in their beliefs, they are they can be traditionalist. I think the most traditional of the Catholic Church are the neo-catechumens. They are very strict, and they are very conservative in their values, to the point where like women may not have a place in theology, even if they are very spiritual and very feeling very righteous. They don't have a place to speak. They don't have a place at the table, in some situations. But then it depends on location. The Archdiocese of San Francisco is going to be a very different place than the Archdiocese of, Houston, Texas. So it's going to be a very different place. And that's why I think a lot of people struggle with entering again, is that every location is different. And this can be said about a lot of different faiths, is that it's the humans that make the experience of religion. There's something transcendent as well involved, but it is the humans involved in the ritual that makes it. And finding a spiritual home, if you are searching for that, it can take a lot of time. It can take a lot of experimenting with different locations, experimenting with different methods of practice. When COVID happened and Mass went online, there was such a radical shift in how people behaved, because you no longer needed to put on your Sunday best. You could go to church in your slippers, and your PJs, and drink coffee and vibe in the living room while you play mass on the TV with your family. Like, that is such a strange experience that I'm very glad I went through. Obviously, COVID was really crazy, but it did kind of show this malleability to ritual, because ritual is so subscribed. It's set in stone, but at the end of the day, it can be altered. It can be changed, and that's such a hopeful message for people who, they're dealing with two truths of, I want to get back into the faith, but I don't feel a place. I don't have a place that accepts me. And there are places. You just have to find them. And it may be a while before a social component is added to that. There are a lot of people who they enjoy the concept of church, but they don't like going because the sermons are all very worldly or very hostile, maybe, to their identity. It may take a long time for you to find a different place or a better place that fits your needs, your spirituality, your flavor of practice. But it is out there. You may have to be a solitary practitioner for a while, but it is out there. And it takes a lot of energy to search for that. So I can understand that as well, I want to believe. There's such a empty space when it comes to, I don't belong, I don't fit in, I don't look the part, I don't have the time to physically take myself to this place for one day a week, or however many times you wish to practice. But it's so important to get back to the root of why you believe. And I think that helps with solitary practice, is really getting back to your own confidence, your own beliefs, your own healing, and your own practice. Because if you have that, you're far more likely to feel comfortable enough to enter a space, even if it doesn't exactly align. It's okay, because you feel confident in what you're doing. So that's really a huge part of healing, is the ability to look again at your religion and make that choice to say, I want to re-enter, I want to avoid this, or maybe have a respectful distance. It really is up to the nature of the healing, and whether or not you want to, especially if there's like criminal activity, whether you want to seek out legal advice. There's so many components to religious trauma that it can affect your relationships, it can affect the way you see the world, the way you see others, and the legal implications of your experiences. So it's something that really, I always encourage people to take the space, even if you have no intention of joining any religion after you've looked at it. It's really crucial to understanding your existence as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty with the fact that like religious trauma is becoming more and more of a discussed topic is that there are beginning to be more and more like therapists who are trained in knowledgeable in religious trauma, as
Mhm.
well as there's a lot of spiritual directors out there exploring religious trauma as well. So there's both like the clinical mental health side of things where there are help and resources available. And then there are also like the spiritual side of things with spiritual directors to help guide some of those paths as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I really appreciate when there are people within churches that are in middle ground positions. So they are not the priest, and they are not exactly laity, though they're not a priest, so they would be laity. But they operate as a middle ground to ensure that the the practitioners are feeling safe and feeling good, and that everything is coordinated for their benefit. Because very easily, if it's this, we have a priest and we have everyone else that follows this religion, it can very easily become, well, now these people are just following that priest. It becomes very worldly. It becomes very elitist or classist, or like I said, it's very worldly. They don't care about the actual religiosity of things. They just are forming this clique around a spirituality. And when you have mediators, when you have people who are either trained to spot discomfort, or their whole position is to ensure that your experience is positive, it really does affect the culture of the institution. And that's why the Catholic school that I worked at was very accepting. It was very open. When I said, nope, I'm changing this curriculum, it doesn't abide by what I feel is best for student experience, they said, awesome, go ahead. We're a Catholic school. It's not like you're changing math curriculum so that they don't have basic math skills. You're just adjusting this theological component. Perfect. So having that trust and having that space is great in education. I've seen in churches them hiring spiritual directors that are different from the priests, that are different from pastors. Their sole goal is to take a step back and to look at the health of the institution as a whole, and then determine whether fixes need to be made. And I'm so happy that therapists are looking into understanding what really makes someone feel comfortable, and really understanding what spiritual growth and personal growth looks like when they go hand in hand. Because in my experiences previously in therapy, it's been kind of a topic that's not brought up. You say you were raised Catholic, and then that is jotted down, and then you move on to your worldly secular experiences. It's like, well, okay, but we need to look back at that. We need to understand what went wrong there. So yeah, I'm proud of the growth of our society, because it seems like we're becoming a lot more comfortable having difficult conversations with diverse religious backgrounds, and also about our experiences, and saying, this is how I was raised, and that affects my ability. It creates bias, maybe, and we're having a lot of conversations around our foundational experiences that I don't think previous generations had the ability to really look at. You were raised in the church and you die in the church. That's what happens. But now we're having the ability to look at these things as whole people, and to understand religion as one aspect of our lives, instead of it engulfing our personality or identity entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're running low on time.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
apologize because I was not paying close enough attention. But my last question is, how do you define spiritual or soul care, and how do you practice it?
So how I define spiritual or soul care, it really does depend on the background of the person. For someone who is looking to exist again within a religious social group, or even on their own, spiritual care is the ability to sit with your feelings, and the ability to identify what makes you feel seen, what makes you feel whole, and what makes you feel happy about this time that we have on earth. I think there's so much anxiety that comes with existence in general, that having a religious background or a spiritual background, or any sort of focus and practice caring for your soul, your person, it needs to be focused on your feelings and what makes you feel happy, and what makes you feel good. there's no really taking a step back from the rules, the norm, and focusing on your uniqueness and the way that you can practice loving yourself, loving others, experiencing yourself, and experiencing the world. So um, it's a skill set, I would say, is soul care. It's something that we're always practicing, hopefully, and we can get better at it over time. For me, since I practice a lot of like neo-pagan faiths, it's a lot of sitting with what I'm doing. If it's some sort of ritual, some sort of practice, whether that be simply lighting a candle, whether that be going to a group worship, and saying, I feel good here. I feel safe. I feel healthy. And I feel like this is the best way to care for myself and others. So, soul care really is, to me, the ability to know oneself, and the ability to understand the feelings that you're going through, because that will help you with uh, understanding whether you feel good in a religious space.